You think you know Stanley Kubrick? Well, here's some things you may not have known about the master of modern cinema. Before he was a filmmaker, Stanley Kubrick was a photographer. He followed his passion early in his life, being chosen as his high school's official school photographer for a year. He also sold a series of photographs to Helen O'Brien, head of the photographic department at Look magazine, who bought Kubrick's work immediately upon seeing it. In the late 1940s, Kubrick began attending frequent film screenings at the Museum of Modern Art as well as cinemas in New York City. This is often cited as the moment where Kubrick's obsession with filmmaking began, and his friends remember him critiquing the movies while he was still watching them in the theater. Kubrick decided to start making his own short films in the early 1950s, but settled on making short documentaries when he realized it could cost as much as $40,000 to make a short film to the standard of quality that he wanted. The first film Kubrick directed was known as Day of the Fight, a short documentary about middleweight boxer Walter Cartier, whom he'd previously photographed for Look magazine. The first feature film directed by Stanley Kubrick was known as Fear and Desire, which was written by Kubrick's high school classmate and friend Howard Sackler. Martin Pervalier, Kubrick's uncle and a businessman, invested $9,000 into his film so Kubrick could make it under the condition that Pervalier be credited as a producer. As his directorial style progressed, and he was given more time and more money to make his movies, Kubrick became known for the extensive amount of detail he put into every one of his movies. He often used massive portions of his budget to create incredibly elaborate sets. For 2001: A Space Odyssey, $750,000 of the film's roughly $10.5 million budget was spent solely on building a 38-foot diameter wheel to represent the spacecraft in the film. Kubrick took the opportunity to subconsciously convey tone with his sets. For his adaptation of Stephen King's The Shining, the sets for the Overlook Hotel were constructed in a way that would be impossible for an actual building to be constructed. This was done to make the audience feel subconsciously uncomfortable. To make sure each of his films perfectly matched his vision, Kubrick's film shoots often took much longer than anticipated. For example, the director spent 3 weeks during the shoot of Eyes Wide Shut filming just one 13-minute scene between Tom Cruise and Sidney Pollack. The film currently holds the Guinness Book of World Records title for longest continuous movie shoot at 400 days. Interestingly, but perhaps unsurprisingly, Kubrick often went over budget with his films. 2001: A Space Odyssey was originally supposed to cost just $6 million before the budget ballooned to that $10.5 million figure. Kubrick often forced his actors to keep doing takes of scenes until they got it exactly as he envisioned. In one instance, for The Shining, he made Shelley Duvall do 127 takes of the same scene so that she would look properly emotional, stressed, and exhausted. He also instructed members of the Shining crew to show Duvall very little compassion so she would feel as uncomfortable as her character did in the film. One of Kubrick's unrealized projects was an adaptation of Brian Aldiss's short story, Super Toys Last All Summer Long. He approached director Steven Spielberg to direct the piece in 1995, with Kubrick intending to produce it. However, after Kubrick's death in 1999, Spielberg decided to see the film to completion, working with what remained on Kubrick's film production company to create the film AI, Artificial Intelligence. This isn't the only one of Kubrick's unrealized projects that might see the light of day after his death. Spielberg announced in 2013 that he intended to produce a television miniseries based on a screenplay Kubrick wrote about French revolutionary Napoleon Bonaparte. Kubrick's first draft of Napoleon was completed in 1961, and he had the intentions of literally hiring an entire country's worth of armed forces for the piece. And here's a bonus one. For years, it was an urban legend that Kubrick was hired by the United States government to fake the moon landings in the 1960s. This was of course false, but that didn't stop some people from creating their own hoaxes to further propagate the urban legend with videos featuring, quote, newly discovered interviews with Stanley Kubrick impersonators. Hey, if Stanley Kubrick was hired to fake the moon landing, his insane attention to detail would probably call for them to actually shoot it on the moon. That's it for this episode of You Think You Know Movies. Make sure to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and get the latest movie and TV news on ScreenCrush.com.